As you fill out this form with your supervisor or division head, the two of you will work together to develop a mutually agreed upon goal, which will go in the first box in the form. Next, you'll look at the Danielson rubric for when you're evaluated at the end of the year. You'll connect this goal to a particular part of the Danielson rubric, and together you'll also discuss how this goal will contribute to the division attaining its goals. You'll also discuss steps that both you and your division head or supervisor need to take. And then finally, indicators that will show progress or attainment of the goal. Once this form is completed and typed up, it'll be given to you for your signature to indicate that yes, this goal was mutually agreed upon and in collaboration with your division head.
If you're unable to come to a mutually agreed upon goal, then there is a procedure which has been formalized, which will come into play.
Hi Dick, thanks for coming in for your goals conference today.
Yeah.
Want to sit down, hopefully have a chance to talk to you through the process, but I see they had a chance to work through the form. Let's start actually with some of the thoughts that you had, and then we'll take that and see how that ties into some of the goals what we're trying to do here in the division and the school.
You know, my honors chemistry class last year, the one thing I noticed when I was thinking about you know, what's happened before, is a lot of the kids, I give them homework. They're not being prepared because they're not having time to do the homework. It's an honors class, they should do it, but it's not always possible. I started thinking about doing is called a flipped classroom.
I have actually heard of that, but let me, why don't you go ahead and explain it to make sure that it matches up what I'm thinking and what you're thinking.
Here's what I envision. I tried it a little bit last year. The idea is, if I'm going to give them information, which I would traditionally give on a blackboard in a classroom, I'm going to make a video. It's not me lecturing, but it's the information. Their homework now is watch the video.
Dick, I'm going to interject just a
Yeah.
moment. There are a couple of questions I wanted to ask just to make sure I have some clarity in my own mind. You said that you made these 5 to 10 minute videos. Were you able to make these consistently on a daily basis for the students?
You know, it wasn't a daily basis thing.
Okay, so it was very specific. You were able to make it very specific though to some of the essential outcomes of the course.
Exactly.
And then there's another question you were speaking at. You mentioned that you started to pilot some of this the prior year.
Last year, yeah.
Last year. Did you get any information from the students, any feedback or any kind of survey from them on their thoughts that made you think that this would be something you'd want to pursue further as a goal?
I did. You know, I not only saw how it was going in the class, and I certainly got responses. Some of the kids who hadn't done homework all year didn't think they needed to do the homework, enjoyed doing this. Along with it, after I learned, I started giving them kind of a note sheet. The other response was a lot of kids thought, this is great, because I can stop the video. The other big response, positive response from this was they used them before the test to review. There were some bad things about it. Some things they didn't like.
You know, why don't you give me a point or two, because I can see from you talking about it that there's a lot of enthusiasm. This is something that you seem to have picked up on, found some success with. I would like to hear those negatives. I'd also like to hear how you envision that this is going to tie into some of our departmental goals or school goals, and how exactly you'd want to tie that into, and how we'd measure the successfulness of a goal like this.
Okay. The one biggest problem I had with this last year, which is really what I'd like to work on this year, is okay, now I got all this time in class. What the heck do I do with it? Which ties into our departmental goals. Part of our departmental goals are not only content, application of that content, the understanding, the integration, you know, the higher level thinking. And so part of that is then incumbent on me to come up with activities we can do in class. And so it turned into some days, here's a worksheet. Work in a group of 2 or 3. You got a question, I'm going to come over and help you guys. It was a lot easier for me to fall back on, okay, well, here's the same worksheet I'd give you, just do some problems. And it wasn't that higher level which I was looking for.
Sure. You're right. Definitely one of our departmental goals is developing that critical thinking, that higher order thinking,
Right.
that skill and content integration. Do you have some ideas of some particular products that you would use to help enhance exactly what you discussed? But it sounds like from your vantage point, you desire more from that. So is there a way that I can work with you, help you, talk through that we could come to some sort of, or how we might enhance those materials to really develop the critical thinking piece, but to also integrate those skills?
You know, that's one of the things I put on here is, those are the things, that's really what I would like to work on this year.
I really like the idea. I like the fact that it's something you've already had some experience with piloting. You have some ideas on how to make it of what worked and the areas of where you're looking to improve it. One of the areas that would be important for me with a goal like this is that as we do work on these types of templates, these types of materials, that there is purpose to, within this unit or these objectives that we're covering, that there's a clear linkage to the specific skills that we are looking to develop within that particular unit concurrently. Specific to this goal that we've talked about, is there anything from the rubric that you thought, here's where this directly ties into, or here's an area where either I'm trying to move from a proficient to a distinguished through this particular goal?
It has something to do with domain 2, the
Okay.
classroom environment. 2D here, managing student behavior, because the time in class was not sitting there staring out the window. They were more active learners. I think 2B also, establishing a culture for learning. They need the responsibility of watching these videos, being held accountable. And then 3, I think, domain 3, 3B, I guess I'd like your opinion, but I'm not sure. I think 3C for sure, engaging students in learning, again, kind of goes with that.
I'm going to interject
Yeah.
because we talked about that classroom follow-up piece, and the biggest, or the next step in this process, to me, again, those purposeful questions and developing that critical thinking, developing that, how do I take this to an application or a synthesis level? How do I ask that question so that within this content I'm specifically addressing those skills? There's no doubt in my mind that that would come back to that.
And like this
3D
says here,
piece.
yeah, the students need to start asking those questions.
Okay, I'm just jotting that down for my notes
Yeah.
too, because I'm going to go back and I'm going to start to take my notes,
Mhm.
and I'm going to write it up on this form here.
Okay.
Before I
Yeah.
turn this in, I'm going to run it by you so to make sure that my language
Mm-hmm.
is consistent with what we've talked about here
Okay,
today.
okay.
Is there anything else that as we've talked through this process here this morning that you'd either like some follow-up on, some clarity on, or maybe another question that's arisen based off anything that I've asked you?
I'm still stuck on that piece of what the activities are going to look like,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I think as I look at other people's work in our division, I may get some ideas of how they, even though it's not going to be the same format in terms of, you know, what you do in class stuff, the kind of questions people are asking.
Dick, would you be opposed to me recommending a few folks in the department, maybe to reach out to people who have done some of this work both in the science department or in the math department, because we have both here, or throughout the building? I'm going to jot that down then as well,
Okay?
and then I'll follow up with you, and I'll follow up with those people as well to maybe get in contact with them.
Okay.
I definitely want to support this. I think there's a lot of things that not just support what we're doing departmentally, but that I also believe in philosophically with what you're doing here. I would want to probably follow up at some point during the year, just to see the feasibility of maybe taking some of these and helping to integrate them into the PLC in some way. And I think that you need the time to kind of tease out what this looks like first, but it would be a follow-up conversation I'd like to have, maybe at the semester. Dick, I did have one last question. As you're thinking about this for the full year, again, you just mentioned that we'd probably like to follow up the semester. Obviously, we will follow up again at the end of the year. Did you have a timeline of how you thought this might roll out throughout the year?
You know, I know I started making the videos last year, so I'm confident I can make the videos. But I think the first thing I think I really need to do is to figure out how to develop the activity for the day in class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think I need to do these first couple months before this is possibly going to be effective. I do need to get feedback from the students though. And so maybe before we meet again at the beginning of second semester, maybe towards the end of first semester, that would be a good time for me to get feedback from them.
I think that'd be a great idea. Dick, now that we've had a chance to kind of go through my questions and your questions, I'd like to actually sit down and start to document the goal.
Okay.
Before we wrap up this morning, I'd like to start just laying down on paper so that we both feel as though we're moving in a direction that works, that we're hearing the same thing.
Okay. Okay.
Before we get anything down on paper, what I was hoping that you could articulate back to me is, you know what our departmental goals are. I had a chance to send those out in email so that each team has an idea of what exactly it is that we value and work on within our department here at Elk Grove.
Their EPAS growth should be significant.
Should have looked at it maybe measurable through the ABC goal.
Oh, okay.
So I do think that we could actually take that and tie that into that
Oh,
student
okay.
success
That makes
goal as
sense.
well.
That makes sense.
Dick, the next question I wanted to ask is, you had a chance to document how we will measure this. We talked a little bit earlier about your timeline. Are there some specific steps that would need to be taken from my perspective to help you with this goal?
Well, you had mentioned, you know, maybe identifying some people that you think would you know, maybe give me some ideas or be able to look at what I'm doing and give me some ideas. Resources of this type of activity I'm looking to produce. I also think that conversation we have at the beginning of second semester would be helpful. And maybe, I mean, I think you have to observe me this year, maybe your observation or a couple observations of how this is working would also be helpful for me.
And then lastly, the indicators.
Mhm.
As we're going through this process, we'd like to avoid, we've got a great goal here at the beginning of the year, we have a very clear plan of what we'd like to and how we'd like to measure at the end, and we have a process for along the way those steps. But are there some indicators that will show you that this is being successful or that this goal is working?
Well, I think the A, B, and C success at the end of first semester will be useful. I think kind of looking at the number of people who are watching the videos and completing, as well as their results on the assessments.
Sure. There's one other idea that I would like to add on here, and let me run it by you. In terms of those indicators, one of the things that would make a lot of sense from my perspective is having some sort of tracking or progress monitoring tool for the student. In order to show that indicator along the way, it'd be nice if the kid could start to track their progress from beginning to end as they're both as they're moving through the unit as well as they're moving through the semester. Do you think that that's something that would be realistic to tie into this process, some sort of tracking or progress monitoring tool that would allow both the student and yourself to see the student's growth on those particular critical thinking and reasoning skills throughout the semester and throughout the year? We talked earlier about the components of the Danielson rubric. I'm just going to jot that down. The last thing I'd still like to do is make sure that the specific language of the goal is common to both of us.
Okay.
What I'm understanding is the goal is to use the flipped classroom as a tool in order to emphasize critical thinking, skill development, and synthesizing and analysis of the content topics, while so that there's more specific feedback and information that's given to students in a timely manner. Would you say that that's an accurate representation of the goal?
It is. I wouldn't mind if you also added content knowledge also in it.
The last component is, can we take these indicators and put some measurable pieces into the goal as well? I think the 2-point growth on average for a student in that class, I'm going to go through, I'm going to take this, clean it up, retype it so that it's, but I'm not going to change any of the language here. What's then going to happen is, if you take a look at the bottom, both of us sign this. I sign it and you sign it. And then once we've signed it, then it will be the document that we'll take a look at then at the end of the year when we follow up on the progress towards this goal.
Okay, very good.
All right.